Yo YouTube! This is my video for Wednesday the 30th of July, and the time now is about 10 past 12, and I've picked up my load this morning, and I'll tell you a bit more about how that's happened, but it's a very satisfying load for me to take from my point of view. So this morning I had an unexpected visit from the nurse at 9 o'clock. They'd forgotten to tell me about it. They were doing some tests. So I wasn't really finished with them until about 10. And that's when I started looking at jobs. And a job came up going from Spilsby, just north of Boston, to Morpeth. And on the notes it said that it was delivery for tomorrow morning, or it could be delivered today if you can get there before 4 o'clock. So I had a quick look at the map, and I worked out that for me to drive from where I was to Spilsby, quarter of an hour for loading, then drive up to Morpeth, was about 5 hours. So I could do that in time. This is about 10:15. I could do that in time if they were quick with giving me the job and getting me loaded. So I put a bid on. It was 208 loaded miles for a long wheelbase van job. I bid 225, and I got a call about 5 minutes later, and the guy said, because I put a note on saying I'll deliver it today, he called me and said, I'm just going to double check with the customer whether that time is correct, 4 o'clock, and then if it is, I'll give you the job. So 2 minutes later, he called back and said the job's on. So it was, by the time I left the house, it was about 10:30. I'd got my shoes on and I was obviously out on the road, out on the van waiting. And I got to Spilsby at 11:30. And I did get a little bit anxious about the timings, because I realised I'd have to get some fuel today. I've only got 120 odd miles of fuel left in my van. So I knew that it was going to be close, but I thought as long as I don't get stuck in congestion, as long as I don't wait too long at loading, I should be fine. And the worst case scenario is I can get to Spilsby, I can see what the loading time is like, and if it's taking too long, I can just double check before I leave whether there's going to be someone on site when I actually get to Morpeth. So I was a little bit anxious, but I thought it's close, but it's very achievable. So when I got to the pickup point, I arrived. There was a lorry being unloaded, which I was parked behind. I went to see someone about my load. He didn't know what I was there for. He went to ask somebody else, and eventually we had a vague idea that they knew what I was taking. I think in hindsight, what may have confused them is that I arrived in a van, not in a big truck. So I moved my van to a bit further down the yard in preparation for being loaded. I was given some paperwork to sign. I then waited for them to bring the pallet around. Now I was aware from the CX notes that the pallet size was 3 meters by 1.2 by 1.3. And so I knew for a fact that that would fit on my van pretty comfortably. It was also half a ton in weight, I can easily take. It's half what I can take. So I was quite confident about this. When they came around with this item, it was on one pallet. It was a long industrial spherical tube with sort of a rubber spiral in the middle and inside, and holes in the outside. And I found out from the guy that what it was a device for drying vegetables. It spins around, vegetables are inside, they work their way down the tube, and then the water comes out holes in the side of the tubing. So that was quite interesting in itself. And they were doubtful that it would go on my van, and I said to them as they came around, my van was made for this sort of load, it's going to be fine. And so I just helped guide him in because it was quite a big, it was basically 1.2 meters in diameter and 3 meters long. So there was not a lot of visual clues for the forklift driver, but he did very well. He got on first time, and I just guided him in, a bit left at one point, then all the way in. So that went on my van really nicely. It was plenty of room to spare, 20 centimetres at the front and the back, loads of height to spare, and obviously about 20 centimetres, or 10 centimetres either side between my wheel arches. My dimensions are 3.4 metres long, maybe a bit more than that, 1.35 between the wheel arches, 1.67 in the doors. So as long as you can get in the doors at 1.67, it will fit on really easily. So this fitted on really snugly, really easily, plenty of space for me to get it strapped up, and they were reasonably surprised about that, but I knew it was going to work. It was quite nice having that kind of understanding that I had no problems with that load, and that they were quite impressed with it in the end. So I then double checked that the number I've got on the paperwork was correct for the customer. I double checked, they've called the customer, they've told him I'll be there about 4 o'clock. I've got the mobile number, and they said, also confirmed that he lives on site. So if I'm a little bit later than 4 o'clock, it's not going to matter. I'm going to ring him half an hour before I get there, and then he'll know exactly what the score is. So I can't really see any problems with this, apart from possibly there might be some congestion that develops on the A1M that's not on my map at the moment, but I've been driving for sort of 20 minutes and it's still saying a 3:30 arrival time. So I do need to get some fuel actually, so that's the one thing that's a bit of an unknown. So I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be a nice drive through the countryside up to the north of England. Nice and easy. My load fitted on well, so before lifted off at the other end. There's no handballing. I'm getting paid an okay amount. I'll talk about that now. So I bid 225. I'm gonna guess I'll make about 165, 170 net once I've got home. I'm assuming I'm not going to get any other work back home because the northeast for me is very hit and miss. Sometimes there is work, but if I assume that there's not going to be, I can't be disappointed, and I can only be sort of pleasantly surprised if I get a job. But I think it's highly unlikely. It's almost like the opposite of my approach to Bristol. Well, if I get a job to Bristol, I'm expecting to get a job somewhere from Bristol at the end of the day. Whereas if I don't get a job, I'm disappointed. Whereas North East is the other way around. I'm not expecting to get anything. If I do, I'm pleased. So I'm going to just turn and burn from Morpeth back down the A1M, back down to home. Maybe I'll be looking for work on the way back down. So I go past Newcastle, Middlesbrough. There's Leeds. There's Hull later on. There might be stuff later on in the evening. But as I said, unlikely. So I'm assuming about 160, 165 earnings today. Now, there'll be people out there who would look at that job and say it's not worth doing, and I wouldn't do that. It's too many dead miles and it doesn't pay enough. And I'm not saying they're wrong. For them, maybe it is wrong. But for me, this is how I look at it. On Monday, I made, after fuel, £149. So I need to make £166 today after fuel, and then I've made all of my business costs expenses for the week. So I'm going to do that with this job, which then means that anything I earn net on Thursday and Friday this week is actually my take-home income for the week. And I like the way that I can look at the figures, and that makes a lot of sense to me, that today serves a purpose. Today pays for my van, for my CX, for my insurance for this week. Obviously my fuel's already taken account of with my net figure. So today and Monday covers all my business costs. Thursday and Friday is what I'm going to take home, my income. So it's going to make Thursday and Friday, I think, quite an interesting time, because I know that everything I earn that day is my actual earnings, my income. So that's how I look at it. I think it works for me, and I'm just so glad to be out on the road. You know, there's a lot going on in my life at the moment, but doing this is just a really nice thing for me to do. I'm talking about health-wise, really. So I've got one more thing to talk about, I think, after that, and then I'm going to let you get on with your day. The last thing I want to talk about is what I did when I picked up the load. And I do this reasonably often, not every single time, only when I think things are a bit more critical, that they're communicated or they get right. So today, because of the distance I'm travelling, because of the nature of the item I've got, it's obviously very important for both the person I'm collecting it from, person I'm delivering it to, and because of the timing being quite tight, I've rung the shipper when I loaded, and I just said to them, anxious who I was, I said, I've now loaded up, I've got the item, my ETA is that, I said 4 o'clock, no, my ETA is half past 3, but I'm going to say 4 o'clock in case of traffic. I know the customer's number to contact them if I need to, I know they're going to be there, and I'll ring them half an hour before I get there. And finally I said, the only reason I'm going to stop today is to get fuel, rather than that go straight up. So I said all of that because I think that, although we like to think that goes without saying, actually we know it doesn't, does it? With a lot of drivers on the CX, all that stuff isn't normal. You know, they might stop and colo, or they might get there late, not care, or might not communicate. So there's loads of reasons why me telling the shipper that is a little bit of overkill, because they know all that from the customer head at the start. But I'm confirming two things. One, I'm confirming it's still correct, accurate. The expectations that I have and he have are still correct. I'm confirming that I'm able to communicate clearly. Actually, maybe there's three things. And thirdly, I'm giving him a sense of, don't have to worry about that now, it's in his hands, it's in the driver's hands. So I don't need a shipper to ask me for confidence, to give the confidence. I'll give them the confidence without being asked, if that makes sense. And I find that when I do that, most of the time the shipper's really thankful and grateful. I know they can see this on, I know they can see it on, track me on CX. I know they can see me, I've pressed loaded, but me ringing them and telling them just saves them a few seconds of trying to search something out when they're really busy. So I'm making their job easier, I'm giving them confidence, I'm communicating the things they need to know in real time, so they know what's going on and don't have to worry about it. So now I think he will hopefully just forget about this job and get on with the other jobs he's got to deal with, and he won't be spending any stress or energy worrying about whether this can get loaded delivered in time. If it goes wrong, at that point I will bring him back and tell him what's happened. But only if it goes wrong, it means I'll get there beyond 4 o'clock. And to be fair, in this particular example, I would ring the customer first, because I've got his number and I've been asked to call him, tell him what's happening, and then once I've got his agreement, I'll then go and tell the shipper, oh, I've dealt with this problem, this is what we've agreed to do. So I wouldn't even need him to do anything at that point. So I hope that made some sense. To me, it's just common sense. I suppose I like that phrase. For me, it's common sense. For me, it's just customer service. It's just treating people how you want to be treated yourself, really. Try and put yourself in someone else's shoes. If I'm delivering a job for someone who's in the office and they don't know where I am or what I'm doing or what I'm like, they need to just have that information provided. There's no skin off my nose. And obviously, he thanked me for that and just said, if you don't have any problems, let me know. So that's exactly how a ship should work. Sometimes when I've done that, I've let the shipper just say, don't tell me, I'll just get on with it. I think that they're shippers that I'm aware of probably aren't the best people to work for. I've had it perhaps twice where I've called someone and they sort of wondered, why are you calling me with this information? When I thought, I'm just updating you. But it's interesting how different people react differently. And as I said, I don't do it very often. I probably do it once or twice a week, because for those particularly important ones, particularly if it's a long distance. If it's a 60-mile trip, it's probably less requirement to do that, unless it's right at the end of the day, I suppose. Right, I'll let you know how it goes. Cheers. Welcome back, YouTube. So it is now 4:15, and I've offloaded my load at Morpeth. It was a farm outside of Morpeth. I've taken a screenshot of my current location, and there's very little competition for drivers where I am, but there'll be no jobs where I'm actually located at the moment. So I'm heading south towards Newcastle upon Tyne, and then maybe something will come up on the way home. My trip back home is 4 hours, just under 4 hours, at 210 miles, and I'll keep looking for work. Interestingly, the guy that offloaded my item, he was very surprised that I came in a van because of the size of the item. He also struggled to get it forklifted off, and it wasn't until I looked underneath the item that I could see what the issue was, because he couldn't see from the back that the item was on a pallet, and it was sort of on a weird pallet. It didn't have any holes for forks at the back, so I don't actually know how the forklift driver forked it on in the first place. I just assumed he put the forks underneath the whole thing and then just slid it out. But it might be that he actually had the forks above the pallet on the item itself that was strapped to the pallet. Anyway, the guy who's the owner of the farm dragged out the tube most of the way out, then came round, lifted up the pallet from the side, and then reversed and turned, and as he did that, the tube pivoted out of my van and he was out. It was actually a very impressive manoeuvre, I must say, and he got that out in the end with a little bit of thinking about it, but he did it very well. So I was finished, I arrived at about 3 minutes to 4, and I had called him half an hour previously to let him know I was going to be there later on. So it was all kind of communicated properly, and it all went off in the end very, very, very well. So I've come off the site. I'm now driving on the A1 towards Newcastle, and I'll just keep going until the job appears or I get home. So I've got basically probably a quarter of an hour, half an hour where a job might come up in the Newcastle area, and I'll just see if I can catch one of them. I don't need a lot of money for it. I can go reasonably cheap, sort of 75p a mile for a small van job. I'll try that if I get a chance to bid, and then I'll let you know how it goes. Hopefully I'll get something, but I'm not expecting to, and if I do just go straight home, I'll be home around about 8:30. So it won't even be that long a day, to be honest. Right, just a quick update. I just had a bid on a job, not accepted, which would have been really good for me. I'll just give you some idea as to what I bid. It was going from Consett to Leicester tonight. Pick up within an hour from where I was. I was about 35 minutes away from Consett. I put a bid on £150 for a small van job going 187 miles loaded, which is approximately 80 pence per mile loaded. And it got sold pretty quickly, and I may have been like too far from it, as in they wanted it done quicker, but I was well within the hour they wanted it to pick up in. But I suspect more likely than that, somebody bid less than I did. So I'm going to have to, if I get another chance, bid a bit lower than 8 PMR. The jobs are very sparse. There's a job that came up from Hartlepool to Pontypridd in South Wales. I would have loved to have done that if I could tramp out. It was something like 320 miles loaded. I didn't even get a chance to bid on that. It went really quickly. Not that I would have bid, sorry. I didn't bid on it because I just couldn't do it. It's way too far out of my way and I can't tramp out overnight. So I didn't bid, but it went quickly. So there's been 2 long distance jobs that I've seen from this area so far, and that's in the last half an hour. So it's not a lot, but when they come up they are really going quickly. Right, final video for today. I've got my stats for today's job. I did fill up with fuel all the way up, and so my new average fuel price for this week is currently 13.19 pence per mile. Today I've driven a total of 458 miles, 458. I will have worked for 10 hours door to door today. I did one CX job at £225, 225, and my fuel costs for today come to £60.41, and so I've rounded that down, and so my net income for today, net earnings for today, is £165, 165, which means I have made over Monday and today enough money to cover my fixed business costs. So I'm happy with that. I'll be back home in about an hour, and then I'll be at work again tomorrow. I've just got to pop to the local hospital to put in some samples. Other than that, I won't be able to go anywhere tomorrow. So thank you very much for listening to my video. I hope that you are all being successful, whatever that means for you. I'll see you again tomorrow on Thursday. Farewell, friends.